Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a cloud solution architect focused on management technologies. Today's discussion will be a discussion of the new Windows Store for Business. So I did a recording on the Windows Store for Business as it was released prior to this, right, and the integration with Config Manager and Intune and different recordings and so on. Today's discussion will focus on the updated Windows Store for Business and some of the details around how to work with, and so on. A topic that a lot of people have been eagerly anticipating. So we'll dig right into it. So in terms of the session today, here's the agenda. We'll talk about what the Windows Store is, specifically then what the new Windows Store is, and draw a little bit of contrast there. Why we care about the Windows Store, and then get into the fun stuff about the Windows Store, talk about requirements, how it works a bit. We'll configure some things, we'll watch it, and then we'll wrap up with some troubleshooting, some tips and tricks, kind of things, and be done. Okay, so what is the Windows Store? Well, the Windows Store historically has been a source for UWP Windows 10 applications on various device types and so on. Right? It has got two components typically: the public store, the private store. So the public store being that internet or that location where users can open the Windows Store that's part of their PC and get to the internet hosted, if you will, list of all the apps and different things that are part of the Windows Store. The private store has been that portion where you as IT may choose to pick certain apps and make them available in your specific flavor of the Windows Store, right? And you might even put custom apps up there, whatever, right? So historically, that's what the two were. IT staff curation. So this simply means that in the Windows Store, as IT, you had the ability to go through and decide which apps were appropriate for your enterprise, which ones to publish from the public store to your private store. That's going to help the users kind of focus what apps they want to download, what apps they have to choose from. You, of course, could decide whether the user had the ability to access both the public store and the private store, or just the private store, and then restrict access to the public store. Right? Those are the controls that you had in the system historically. Right? Okay, and then you had deployment options. So there was a mechanism where users could directly obtain their apps from the public or the private store. You could, as IT, make certain apps available, especially with integration with Config Manager and Intune. You can make apps available through one of those tools and make them optional, let users have them on their desktop if they choose, or you could force them on the user, your choice, right? And then the user experience with the store is that it's really easy to use. It's a familiar store type approach, letting the user self-serve what they might want from the store is similar to the experience they may have with other types of stores, like on an iPhone, an iPad, Android device, whatever, right? So it provides the store also provides a unified experience across devices if you want that, right? And then lastly, custom apps. So you can build and publish your own custom apps into your private store, whatever. Invite others to develop and publish apps for you, etc. So that's the Windows Store historically. Now, what is the new Windows Store? Well, there's a lot of similarity, but let's talk about it. So, in the new Windows Store, it's not only a source for UWP apps, it's also Win32 apps, and another type I know I have on a slide coming up that I forget right now, but we'll see it on a slide in a minute. It is a store that is focused on Windows 10 and Windows 11, right? So, just like before, you're going to have that store on Windows 10, Windows 11, and it's going to look real similar, right? But here's where we start to see some contrast. So I said historically it had public and private stores. Well, you can still have that private store experience, but it's not the same thing as it used to be. So the private store no longer is implemented through the Windows Store. Think of it this way: the private store in the Windows Store, there might have been a shelf that had your apps, and that was labeled your private store, right? Compared to the publicly available store. There is no private store any longer that's part of the Windows Store. However, you can absolutely achieve the same thing by using Intune, right? To deploy apps that you care about to make available to your users through the company portal, right? So that's absolutely how you would do that now, is to use Intune to establish that private store. IT staff curation, absolutely still in place by Intune management. So if you as IT want to make certain things available, make it easier for your users to choose which apps that they should install, absolutely possible through Intune, making those available through the company portal. If you want to restrict access to the public store and still allow apps to be deployed from Intune, absolutely possible. No problem there at all, right? So those are your deployment options. Um, well, from the Windows Store directly, the public store, from Intune, absolutely, right? But when we think of deployment options, right, it is absolutely possible to grab something manually from the store, the user can. But if you as IT want to deploy something to your devices, again, the easiest way is Intune. Absolutely. Could you do it manually? Sure you could, right? Because the store for business just simply uses package manager and winget commands to do its thing. So it's absolutely possible to deploy manually using command line tools. That's kind of how the third parties we envision will implement management, would be through using options like that, right? People ask about config manager. Will config manager support deploying items from the new Windows Store? And the answer is no, not directly for sure, right? The work has been put into making that available through Intune. And so if you have an Intune config manager co-managed environment, then yeah, you can have the config manager agent on that, but the deployment engine for your Windows Store apps will be Intune. In terms of user experience, so it can be very, very similar to what it has been historically. The difference is that your custom apps would be deployed through the company portal or directly to the device. Right? No reason to stop at the company portal. If you want the app there and you require the app to be there, no problem. Just go ahead and force it down onto the device, and then for those that your users, you want to allow them to browse and choose whatever, then you can make those available through the company portal. So custom apps, right? Can we still do custom apps? Well, hopefully you've already answered that for yourself. The answer is yes, through Intune, right? Through Intune. And then the entire back end, the entire structure of the Windows Store is driven by Package Manager. So that will help you do deployments from your Windows Store. You can remove things, you can update things. There's a ton of commands that can be implemented through Package Manager and specifically winget. Right? So I'll show you in a moment an example command line of using winget. That is not the focus of this session. I'm not going to go into manually using winget to pull packages and so on from the store. It's a very straightforward kind of thing to do, as you will see from the command line, but that's about as far as I'm going to take it on the manual side coming up. All right? Okay. So why do we care about the Windows Store for business? And now we're just thinking in context of this could apply to the old Windows Store, could apply to the new Windows Store. Well, some things on the slide are only for the new Windows Store, but in terms of benefits, right? Certainly scale. And so being able to manage the Windows Store at scale, well, the Windows Store itself, if you let users have access to it, is going to scale to fit whatever the needs are for your users. But in the idea, the context of you sending things out in your quote unquote private store experience through Intune, absolutely scaling, helping you do that. Being able to acquire apps in bulk, publish apps where you choose to, in bulk, having that ability to have the private store, the curated experience we talked about via Intune, right, is a very good reason. Having flexible choices for distribution options, as we just talked about. There's a lot of things you can do. The easiest way, for sure, is to leverage Intune, or if you want to, let the users go to the Windows Store directly. But you do have options if you want to, and so on, right? So keeping your apps up to date is something that is an important thing, right? And I'll talk more about that. There's a section where there's some frequently asked questions that we document. So I'll talk about uh, the keeping your apps up to date concept whenever I get to that as we start to wrap up the session, right? So the Windows Store is really designed for organizations, IT. There's a lot of work. We'll talk about some of this in the closing comments, frequently asked questions part, where third parties can participate and publish apps to the Windows Store. That's part of. I don't think it's there yet as of this recording, but it's something we're planning to do, working to do. Universal apps, absolutely, that's there. Being able to deploy more than universal apps, so MSIX apps, Win32 apps, PWA apps, all of that is part of the store for business. You'll actually see some examples of universal apps and Win32 apps coming up. What are the requirements for the new Windows Store? Well, certainly Windows 10, Windows 11, right? And then I put in here Intune. If you want to manage the experience and have that private store experience, then having Intune in the environment is absolutely important. I say important and not required because Intune itself is not required for using the new Windows Store, but it is a very useful option, a recommendation for those organizations who would like to manage apps being deployed throughout their company, and the way that happens is through the company portal. So the company portal is required if deploying optional apps through Intune. Required app deployments, they don't need the company portal. I did a couple of required app deployments to my test device that I'll show you in a moment, and I don't have the company portal on that test device, right? Okay. And the company portal is a solution only available with an Intune license. And sorry, I said the L word, the license word, so I got a little bit of a shudder across my skin as I did that because the license word just causes that to happen. So sorry about that. Okay, so how does this actually work? So this is just a diagram that I lifted out of our documentation. So the concept is you might have IT. Over here, you might have your information worker over here browsing the store. And then you might have Endpoint Manager, in this case, Intune. Co-managed through config manager, but it's still Intune, right, driving it. Here that we want to use to deploy whatever IT says needs to be deployed. Something through the company portal, the information worker might want to have deployed. So its source may be Intune, right? Store for business, but published through Intune. And so Intune will work with Windows Package Manager framework and deliver things from the private or from the public store. That could be any of these types of apps, or from your private repository. So this could be in-house line of business apps, privately developed apps, ISV apps from a specific company, whatever that may be. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot view of how this might work. Okay, so let's get into the fun stuff. So this is what I was referring to, and this is as far as I'm going to go with the use of winget. But here's an example command line where you might use winget to directly pull, in this case, Microsoft Power Toys, out of the Windows Store, and then that would cause it to be deployed to your systems, right? And so let's just acknowledge here, knowing that we have the ability to use winget manually. Could you do this with Config Manager? Sure, you could. It's just not as easy to do as with Intune. You would kind of have to build your own solution. But could you deploy this command line and make it run through Config Manager? Absolutely. Right? Could you do it through PowerShell? Absolutely. Right? There's so many ways you could run these command lines, but the cleanest way is to use what we built through Intune. Right? So that's what we're going to focus on for the rest of the session, is actually seeing this work. In fact, sorry, let me go back. I want to show you in Intune what I've done to set up this demo. All right, so let me grab the Intune portal, and there it is. All right. So in order to, I'll take you and show you the apps deployed to my virtual machine in a minute, but in order to use Intune to deploy these Windows Store apps, let's go take a look. So to get there, we will go under Apps, and then we will go to All Apps. And then under All Apps, we're just going to go through. I've got a couple added here, but I'll just go through and show you. So I'm going to go Add an app. And if I look at app type, you'll see the store app that's new. This is the old store. So what we want is the new Windows Store. So I'm going to click on this. We have some detail where we can go learn more about the Windows Store. I'm just going to select that I want to add an app. And so here, the way we add the app is we can search the Microsoft Store for any app that we want. So I'm going to go search the store. And once you start typing, you'll have some things. So let me just show you Microsoft right now. Right, so I'll search for Microsoft. It kind of goes through in the background, shows you the different apps that are available from Microsoft. You see the Universal app, UWP app, the Win32 apps that you can deploy through the store. That again is unique to the new Windows Store. I can do some other things. Let's just do Adobe here, and you'll see the Adobe options. I don't know. Let's just see Net. And see what comes up with Net, and so you'll see some of that. And if you want to, I don't know, thinking of games, Candy Crush, whatever. I don't see Candy Crush right in front of me right now, but I do see some details that came back. Oh, we can keep going. We can look at, I don't know. Let's see Saga. See if there's anything there. Got a couple there. I don't know. Let's choose package. So if anything comes up, there's some things there. And then finally, we'll just stop there, right? We'll just stop there. And so it's really easy. It's really easy to just click on an app, and I'll just click on that, right? And then move on down. Click on an app, and then we know the detail about the app that we just put in for you, right? You can change some things. You can add some things if you want to, but we put in the detail that we know about the app, right? So, okay, good enough. So that's just a quick, here's how it works, kind of thing. Now, let me close this. I'm going to move on to the in-action part, and this is where I have some apps that are deployed. So let me show you what I have. So I've got the Adobe Acrobat Reader published through the new Microsoft Store app. I have, let's see, what else do I have? Here's Power Toys that's published through the new Microsoft Store tie-in. And there's one more in here somewhere that I did. So Power Toys, Adobe, and then, let's see, I have to load more. I just chose to do this one as well, something called Sweet Candy. I don't even know if that's a game, whatever it is. I just chose it off the list and decided to deploy. So those are the demo apps that I have configured. So now let's go look at one of my test devices that I have sent this to. and see if it worked, and then we'll dig in a little bit more from there. Right? And so, by the way, while this is logging on, if I go look at this app, you'll see it in fact deployed. Right? Here's the details. So two installed and one not applicable for this one. So there's three devices that I targeted. Two of them have it, including the one I'm going to show you, and one of them not applicable. So this is Adobe Acrobat Reader through the store. So I targeted 6 here. 6 are installed. So good to go there. And then if I go back and look at the other one that I have here, Power Toys, same kind of deal. I've got, interesting, I have 6 that says that failed. I didn't realize that was the case. Well, either way, so you'll see 2 out of 3, so that's not terrible. Okay, so let's minimize, or let's bring the desktop up. Here we go. So pretty darn easy. So you see Adobe has the shortcut here. You can see Adobe is on the start menu, so it definitely is there. The other one that I successfully deployed is Sweet Candy here, right? Oh, it's a selfie sticker. Interesting. Again, I have no idea what that app is. I just decided to use it to deploy from the store. And then installation failed. So that's interesting. So it's going to show me a notification as to why Power Toys apparently failed. So yeah, so this is just telling me that Power Toys failed. Not sure why at the moment, but you can click on it. You can get some more details. So that's actually kind of cool that it did fail in this instance. And by the way, the registry pop-up little snippet that you saw come up there is actually an unrelated thing. It was looking at Passport for Work registry key that I had pushed out from Intune to this device as well for testing and looking at the biometrics folder. So that really has nothing at all to do with Power Toys, even though it came up whenever I clicked on Power Toys. But either way, so 2 of the 3 apps have been deployed. The third one didn't. I'm not going to dig in right now to figure out why that one didn't install, but I will show you when we get to the troubleshooting side where you can see some of the reasons that things may fail, may not install on a device. So right now, let's just grab this out of the way, and I'll get this out of the way as well. Right? Okay. So really easy. So folks, this is really not difficult here. The tie-in to Intune is really easy, really straightforward. Being able to manage these things pretty easy, pretty straightforward through Intune. And one thing again I want to point out. So you see the apps installed on my device, my test device, but I didn't show you this. I will. So I mentioned that Company Portal was a requirement if you want to make apps optional for the user to install. I do not have Company Portal on this device at all. It's not required to install the apps onto your managed systems. It is only required if you want to give that user experience where they can go browse through the apps that they have available and choose from there, right? Okay. One other distinction, do I mention it now? Do I mention it later? I'll mention it now. I'll show it to you again shortly. But one thing about Intune, right? So when you think Intune, you think that Intune is a management tool that works with the MDM stack on the various devices that can be loaded onto Intune. And that's absolutely true, right? But it's also absolutely true to say that not every single app or not every single capability is possible through the MDM channel on the device. A lot of things are, right? But there are some things that you as IT will want to do that you cannot do through MDM directly, right? Things like running PowerShell scripts or deploying Win32 apps or a number of things, right? For that reason, we have on every Intune managed device, let me just pull this one back in. If you look at services, right? If you look at the services list on a device and you search for Intune, then you are going to see, you should, oh, hang on. Why am I not seeing it? There, Microsoft Intune Management Extension. So it's called the Intune Management Extension. Look for Microsoft Intune Management Extension in Services. You will see it there. You will not have ever installed it, right? Because when you manage a device, that service gets loaded onto the device automatically by Intune. Why? To facilitate being able to do certain things that you as IT want to do that Intune has capabilities for, but the MDM channel itself does not provide, right? Why do I tell you that? Because the store apps are deployed through the Intune management extension, right? Uh, I haven't gone through to look at every single type of app. I think all of them are through the Intune management extension, but honestly, I haven't looked. I know that Win32 apps are installed through the Intune management extension, and so knowing that Intune management extension is there is relevant. It's important when you're trying to figure out when things aren't working, right? And so I'll turn the page in a minute. We'll see some logging that is kind of unique to the Intune management extension. And if you're familiar with Configuration Manager, these logs will feel like a comfortable shoe because we all love logs in Configuration Manager. So I'll show you those in just a second. But just know that Intune management extension is there. It is loaded automatically whenever your device is enrolled in Intune. There are some things that are different about the Intune management extension compared to normal MDM management, right? One quick thing, and then I'll just move on. For MDM management, there is, we document, and we may for Intune management extension too, some of the details, but people ask sometimes, what is the polling cycle for Intune, for Intune, right, for the Intune managed devices? And then when they hear the answer, they immediately say, well, that's way too long, because the answer, the polling cycle, is about every 8 hours, right, depending on the device type. People say, well, that's way too long, right? And hold on, right? Because the real answer is it depends also on what you're doing. There are certain actions, if you go and create a required deployment of something that we will use for Windows, the Windows notification service, Apple, the Apple push notification service, for Google, or for Android, it would be the Google Play, whatever. And that, using those tie-ins, will allow the device to come and check in much, much, much more quickly, right? Whenever you send out a required deployment, Intune kind of taps one of these services on the shoulder, depending on the devices that you're sending it to, and then that service taps the device on the shoulder and says, go check in right now, right? That's why when you're testing in the lab, you see things start to happen much quicker than every 8 hours, right? The 8 hours I kind of view as a failsafe. Why is Steve rambling about all of this? Because the Intune management extension is different, right? It has a default polling cycle of once an hour. I think I may show this to you in a minute, right? You can force that polling cycle to happen by restarting the Intune management extension service. You can reboot the machine, right? But it is different. And so don't look at it whenever you deploy a store app and think, why is it not there yet? Because it should have used Windows notification service and done all this stuff and so on. It's not happening yet. In my case, I actually had to wait for about for the first one to show up, probably about an hour and 15 minutes after I deployed it. I just wanted to let it do its thing. And so I waited for it, and that's about how long it took, I think, as I recall. Certainly not immediately. Okay, so now edging toward the, we'll move right back to the machine here. So some troubleshooting things, right? So I told you about the polling that happens. Let me show you on the device where the default polling cycle is set for Intune management extension. So that's in the registry. Let's open regedit regedit, and then go to Software Microsoft. Let's back up here. Okay, Software Microsoft, and then down to Intune Management Extension, I believe. Let's see if we find it. Intune Management Extension. There we go. Okay, so if we open up Intune Management Extension and go down to Settings, then we will see the interval. Why is interval? Oh, interval is the default, so it's not here. It's going to be 60 minutes. By default, you set the interval in terms of seconds, right? In this registry key. So if you want to modify the default, you can do so, in this registry key here. Okay, so moving away, while we're on this machine, moving away from the registry. So I mentioned that the store apps are installed with the Intune Management Extension. There is logging for the Intune Management Extension. So if we go to, come on, open, there it comes, come on. If we go to Program Data, here, and then go down to Microsoft and Intune Management here, and then Intune Management Extension, then you will see logs. And there's not a lot of them, right? There are a few, and they're useful logs, but there's not a ton. For example, the agent execution log. So this is basically going to be for troubleshooting PowerShell or proactive remediation scripts, right? So that's another place where we use the Intune Management Extension, proactive remediation as a part of Endpoint Analytics. This is definitely not an Endpoint Analytics session, but if you haven't taken a look at the proactive remediation capabilities under Endpoint Analytics, absolutely do. It is not limited to just Endpoint Analytics types of data. You can use remediation scripts, proactive remediation scripts for really whatever you want, and it's very, very useful. Client health log. Here we're going to have health events written to this log that you can look for, whatever. Intune Management Extension. So this is the log file for installations of apps, Intune Win, whatever sensor log, logging of all subscribed events that you might care about. So in terms of tracking what we have done in the lab, right? So let's go into directly the Intune Management Extension log. In fact, I think, yes. So here I captured a version of the log from whenever I did do the installation, right? Just so I can show you. So if we open up the log here, and I just search for a few key things, and we'll be able to find where we want to be pretty quick. So let me find, and I'm going to look for, first of all, get policies. So here, well, in fact, let me just go to the bottom and search up, because that will be probably the more relevant time period. So here, and search up. Okay, so if we go look for get policies, then we will see detail. Let me shrink this down a little bit. See detail about the particular policy that we are interested in. Let's go down a little bit. There we go. Okay, so very, very similar actually to some of the logging you can find for applications in Configuration Manager. So this particular policy, if we scroll over, we'll see it's for Microsoft Power Toys, and it has the version information and all the install information, the maximum runtime information, all of the detail, return codes and things that you would expect from an app like this. It's all contained in this big blob of data right here, right in those lines, that you can see all of that. So you know the policy has arrived at the device. And maybe, I don't know, let's see if we can find Adobe. Can we find it? Okay, we didn't find that one. So maybe I didn't grab the log that has that, and then we need to see if we can do candy. So there's one for Sweet Candy. So Adobe's not in here for whatever reason, but Sweet Candy and Power Toys are, right? So we can see the absolute details about those apps, in the log. And I'm not going to go through all of the details there, but just to show you where you can see activity happening on your system when you deploy these apps, right? Okay. Now, where did my mouse pointer go? There it is. All right, let me close that out. All right. So what else do we want to talk about? So let's move on to tips and tricks. Let me just get this out of the way. Let's talk about tips and tricks. And there's a few here that I want to call out. So the first one I want to talk about is policy consideration. So as a reminder, the reason I went into that tangent is because I knew that I kind of wanted to whenever I started going through building this session. So just looking at a reminder and a policy considerations note to myself to talk about that. So I've already done that, talking about the difference between Intune Management Extension, how the polling works, how the logging works, etc. It just showed you that. Now, in terms of frequently asked questions, so a few, right? Is it possible on the various stores and app side, is it possible to pick and choose from a combination of stores and a combination of apps, right? And the answer is yes, it is absolutely possible to pick from a variety of sources of Microsoft Store apps, including you have the Microsoft Public Store apps and also apps that are made available from private sources, including software vendors and line of business applications not available in any public store like through Intune. Now, let me put an asterisk here for a moment. I don't think that the private sources from independent software vendors is a tie-in that is available at the time of this recording. It is something that we are working on. It may actually be. I haven't checked in a couple of weeks whenever I built this presentation. So it may be there now. But at the time of the presentation preparation, it was one of those things we hadn't finalized yet, and so on, right? But when we do, it'll be there. And then the private sources that you might want to pull in from other vendors or whatever will require prior authentication from the owners of those private repositories and authentication to be able to access and view those applications. But that is absolutely a plan if it's not there right this moment. Right? Okay, so in terms of private store, will there be a private store in the new store for business like there was in the original store? I already talked about this. The answer is no. The private Microsoft Store for Business, as it existed, is retired, right? You absolutely can have that same experience by leveraging Intune and the company portal to provide that end-to-end app experience for your end users, right? Okay. In terms of app version control, is it possible to force or to gate a user to stay on a specific version of an app until a newer version is approved for a given enterprise? And the answer there is no, not currently. The store itself only keeps a few of the most current versions of an app. Right? Think of it as an N-2, maybe an N-3 in some cases, kind of scenario. So we are evaluating with the new store integration ways to enable maybe per app whether auto updating is appropriate for the app or not. That is not something there right now, but it is something being considered. So if you need something like that where you make sure that users stay on a given version of an app, then you'll need to do that manually and not rely on the store there, because otherwise we will automatically update. In terms of role-based authentication and controls, does Intune have support for that with the new Windows Store? The answer is absolutely. With Intune integration, totally possible to use the full scope of role-based capabilities for store apps as well, right? And then in the category of what's in progress, what's planned, as of right now, this is the state. So a few things are in progress and planned, but not quite there yet. So providing access to an expanding catalog of applications above and beyond what's available in the current Microsoft Store for Business. That is the tie-in I'm talking about with independent software vendors, not quite there yet. Supporting any number of Windows Package Manager repositories hosted internally for an organization, kind of the bring your own repository, is again something that we're actively in design for and will be bringing to organizations in the future for that. In terms of store access, if you want to, so that's a common question I've seen from some folks, various emails and forums and so on. There were controls to prevent users from being able to access the Windows Store directly, but you can still then provide them managed apps. And so what are the controls going to be like for that? And so a couple of little bullets on that. So for controlling access to the public store, really nothing has changed. There's policy to allow access to only the private store, and it will still do this so that you can deploy apps, prevent deploying apps from the public store, but still deploy them through Intune without a problem at all, right? So another version kind of that question. So a question, we are updating, this one came from a forum I was reading. I kind of chopped it down a little bit and made it more of a summary. But this was from a user. They are saying, we are updating our core that we use and would like to know the best practices for removing or hiding Microsoft Store events from popping up in other apps that would not be used in an enterprise environment, and wanted guidance on that. And the answer is, there is a policy called Show Private Store Only, and that is the only thing that needs to be adjusted to prevent users from accessing the public store while allowing the store itself to still function for things like automatic app updates and so on, right? So that the names of some of the policies may not be immediately intuitive, but the policies are really the same, and you can achieve the same kinds of things. And then let's see, there was another about blocking. This is also from a forum. We want to block the public store and allow deployment only with Intune and or package manager. So the answer for that is, again, absolutely use the policy called only display the private store within the Microsoft Store and set that to enabled. And when you do that, you can distribute that via Intune and block anything from the store itself, right? So anyway, and really that's it, right? That's what I wanted to talk about with the store. Lots of interest in the new store. Lots of people asking, honestly, for this session to be recorded. So that's why I went ahead and did it as quickly as I could here to try to get the information out. Hopefully it helps answer some questions. It isn't, again, I hope you walk away with the feeling, again, it's not a huge shift. It's really not a huge mindset shift even. Yeah, there are some things that are different, but those things that are different themselves are not challenging per se. It's just starting to work with them and kind of understanding some of the ways things work and so on. And I think you will be in good shape. So we will wrap the session for now, and happy Windows Store for Business browsing, and we will see you next time.